Thank you, Reverend Patricia and Reverend Eric. That was beautiful. Thank you. And mabuhay ka, Kalui. Mabuhay, Kalui. Mabuhay. We will continue your legacy. Kami ang magpapatuloy. And to continue that legacy, we remind everyone that we have shirts in the legacy of Kalui right at the back. Should you wish to wear the legacy of Kalui behind, please look at the back. The shirts are there. Yes, that's a shirt in our tribute to Kalui that we will wear throughout this conference and throughout our lives. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, Kalui, for setting the roadmap in building a society of freedom and peace. Thank you very much. At this point in time, I would like to take time to recognize our co-sponsors for this event. We have the World Council of Churches. We have the World Communion of Reformed Churches. We have the World Christian Student Federation, the United Methodist Church General Board of Church and Society, the Disciples of Christ and Union Church of Christ, Board of Global Ministries, the United Church of Canada, the Anglican Church of Canada, Kairos, Canadian Ecumenical Justice Initiative, Congregation of the Sisters of St. Anne, and the Benedictine Sisters Missionaries of Tutsing. Good job, everyone. Thank you. And now, as we continue, we will now be hearing from our keynote panel, which will be moderated by a solid supporter, a very good Pichina, of the Filipino people, Ms. Claire Chastain. Claire is a Global Deputy Secretary General of ICHIRP and is one of the main movers of Asociación Catalana per la Pau, or Catalan Association of Peace. Claire,
hello, buongiorno, good morning, bonjour. Thank you, Zarina Pichina. Is it okay? Yeah. It's a pleasure and it's an honor for me to be moderating this panel of very powerful speakers. As Zarina said, my name is Claire. I am French, but I live in Barcelona, Catalonia, and I work and I'm committed in an association called the Catalan Association for Peace, Asociació Catalana per la Pau. We were founded 35 years ago, and about 7 years ago, we decided to put the Philippines as a priority country in our work and commitment. So we work for human rights, just and lasting peace, social transformation, human emancipation, and dignity. This is a huge program. On this panel this morning, we will hear about the current situation of the Filipino peasants and why there is an urgent need for international solidarity from faith communities. Should you have any questions, reflections on their interventions, please kindly reserve them for the plenary discussion that we will have later with all the speakers and all the panels of this afternoon. So I will directly give the floor to our first speaker for this panel. This is Bishop Joseph Agpaoa. He's the acting General Secretary of the United Church of Christ in the Philippines and the Vice Chairperson of the National Council of Churches in the Philippines, and he's also the co-convener of EcuVoice. Bishop, you have the floor.
Good morning, everyone.
Hello.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so thankful for this opportunity to share our faith story as church people in our journey with the different sectors in the Philippines, seeking for genuine and lasting peace. First, let me begin my sharing let me begin by sharing a personal story. It was June of 2002, more than 20 years ago, when I was abducted by 5 men in front of my office. My abductors were in civilian clothes with short and long firearms. They interrogated me inside a pickup vehicle, and they accused me of being part of the National Democratic Front of the Philippines and warned me to stop my support and connection with several peasant organizations in Cagayan Valley region, or else I and my family will be killed. They reiterated that those peasant groups are branch of the Communist Party of the Philippines. They freed me after an hour of intense interrogation. I suspect that my abductors were elements of an intelligence unit of the security forces in the region. Because of fear, because of confusion at the time, I decided not to report that incident to the authorities. The said incident has been very traumatic to me and my family. Fast forward, sometime in 2023, several men in civilian clothes introducing themselves to be a personnel of Philippine Army visited our house in Solano, Nueva Vizcaya, and informed us that the faith-based youth organization where our 3 children and some other church youth are active members is a front organization of the CPP. They asked our 3 children and the other youth to sign a document saying, among others, that they are now turning back to the fold of the law and will no longer support the CPP and the New People's Army. Because of fear, they just affix their signatures in the document. As a background, the said organization is an ecumenical group of young people advocating environmental protection. It is one of the active members of an alliance of environmentalists in the region opposing a large-scale mining operation in the province of Nueva Vizcaya and Quirino. The incidents that I shared are just 2 examples of many cases of human rights violation in the Philippines against church people who are involved in the prophetic witness and peace-building mission of the church. It has been happening before and continuously happening until now. Let me mention some of the recent victims of church attacks in the Philippines. UCCP Pastor Jimmy Tebes of Himamaylan City, Negros Occidental, who was imprisoned for more than 6 years after, together with 6 other lay leaders of UCCP because of multiple counts of murder and frustrated murder filed against them. UCCP Pastor Nathaniel Dodo Valiente of Bohol was imprisoned for more than 3 years because of illegal possession of firearms and explosive charges. UCCP Pastor Reverend Edwin Egar and lay leader Ronald Ramos of Southern Tagalog were accused or charged of violating the anti-terrorism law and anti-financing terrorism law. United Methodist Church pastors Reverend Julius Neri Camanong, in fact, we received a news that he was arrested 2 or 3 years ago because the court has already issued warrant of arrest against him. So Reverend Julius and Reverend Joel Ordanesa and lay Romeo Rosel who were accused of financing terrorism, who have been recently arrested, as I've said a while ago. Another Methodist pastor, former district superintendent, Reverend Gloripe Maluntong of Southern Luzon, who was charged with attempted murder. The first woman bishop of the Iglesia Filipina Independiente, Bishop Emeline Dacoycoy of the Diocese of Batak, was also accused of being recruiter of NPA. Also, IFI lay worker Aldim Yanez, who has been in prison for more than 3 years now because of illegal possession of firearms and ammunition and financing terrorism charges. And Mariel Dumiquel of the Rural Missionaries in the Philippines, who is in jail for 5 years now because of cases of illegal possession of firearms and financing terrorism charges. Another form of human rights violation that needs to be exposed is the freezing of bank accounts and assets of church institutions, local churches, religious groups by the Anti-Money Laundering Council. This is on the ground that these are being used to finance terrorist activities. Among these are the freezing of the bank accounts of UCCP Fatima in Bohol, UCCP Haran in Davao, and of the Rural Missionaries, the Philippines. Worse is that a civil forfeiture proceedings against the assets of RMP has already been granted by the court in favor of the government. In the midst of all these church attacks against churches and church workers, it is also worth mentioning some of our recent legal victories. UCCP Pastor Jimmy Tebes and his co-accused have been acquitted late last year. Also, Reverend Nathaniel Valiente, Reverend Edwin Ecar, and lay leader Ronald Ramos, they were also acquitted. True indeed that being courageous, steadfast, and working in solidarity with each other in facing abuses and seeking justice is very essential. It is in this context that we are appealing to continue your act of solidarity to all the victims of church attack, to all the Filipino rights defenders and peace advocates, and to all the Filipinos who are struggling for genuine and lasting peace. One way to do that is to support the recent report and recommendation of Irene Khan, the special rapporteur, UN rapporteur on freedom of expression and opinion. In her report to the UN Human Rights Council, Khan calls the Philippine government to abolish the NTF-ELCA, to immediately release all political prisoners that include those detained church workers, to combat impunity vigorously, to review and amend the anti-terrorism law, among others. Further, let us continue exerting efforts to call for the resumption of the peace talks between the government of the Republic of the Philippines and the National Democratic Front of the Philippines. In our struggle for peace, discussing the root causes of armed conflict in the Philippines in the negotiating table is necessary. For genuine and lasting peace will only be attained if these are being addressed and resolved. In conclusion, may I share with you part of the UCCP Peacemaking Our Ministry statement, approved and issued 39 years ago, and I quote, "Genuine and lasting peace comes when justice is served. For as long as peasants remain landless, For as long as the workers do not receive just wages, for as long as we channel more money to the military than to basic social services, for as long as we are politically and economically dominated by foreign powers, for as long as the root causes of social unrest remain untouched, there will be no peace. Thank you very much.
Hello? Now, okay. Thank you very much, Bishop Agpaoa. Next, we will be hearing two video messages, one from Rafael Paeng Mariano, Paeng from the Kilusan Makbubukit ng Filipinas, who will give a direct testimony on the ongoing peasant struggle in the Philippines. And then another testimony from Amirah Lidasan, a Moro activist who hails from the Iranian tribe in Maguindanao. Amirah is part of the groups of Moro Christian People's Alliance and Sandugo movement of Moro and indigenous people for self-determination. She recently ran a senatorial campaign in the Philippines under the Makabayan bloc slate. I had the privilege to be with her a year ago in Mindanao, so I'm kind of sad that she could not make it. She was supposed to be here in person today, but technicalities with the visa application got in the way, unfortunately. But we are grateful despite the distance that Paeng and Amirah will still be with us through their powerful messages. Thanks.
Good day, friends and compatriots. A warm greetings of solidarity. I am Rafael B. Mariano, the Chairperson Emeritus of the Kilusang Magbubukid ng Pilipinas, KMP, or the Peasant Movement of the Philippines, and a former Secretary of the Philippine Department of Agrarian Reform. I am deeply honored to speak at Pagtatanim, a global interfaith conference for the Philippines. This gathering of people of faith from across the world is historic and vital. As you come together there in Rome, carry with you the stories, struggles, and hopes of the Filipino peasantry. After 3 years, the illusions conjured by the Marcos Jr. regime have all but faded. Behind all the posturing, the spectacle, and the high-sounding slogans of Bagong Pilipinas, we now see what it really is: greed, incompetence, and repression wrapped in recycled gimmicks. Marcos Jr., like his father Ferdinand Sr., offered promises: land reform, cheap price, independent foreign policy, but this action betrayed this. Instead of change, the regime only continued failed programs. The most infamous was the promise for the 20 pesos per kilo of rice. What came instead was the continued ruin of the local rice industry and suffering of the Filipino farmers, all-time high importation of rice, and the unrelenting increase in retail prices. In 2025 alone, the Philippines is expecting a record 5.4 million metric tons of rice to be imported. Now, the Philippines is the largest rice importer in the world. Rice tariffs were slashed. Rice smugglers and hoarders went unpunished. Meanwhile, the BBM or Benting Bigas Merona rice showcase became nothing but a campaign stint. Filipino rice farmers remain reeling from the impacts of rice liberalization law after 6 years of its implementation. From Rodrigo Duterte to Marcos Jr., their policies deliberately wrecked rural livelihoods and Philippine agriculture. and in the name of market liberalization. Worse, Marcos Jr. paraded around as champion of land reform. But this land reform was nothing but a gimmick. It was a show staged with certificates of condonation with release of mortgage or pogroms and parcelized certificates of land ownership award or CLOAS. The Philippine Department of Agrarian Reform, DAR, claims to have distributed 195,000 land titles, but 68% of that, or 132,000, are just individualized land titles under the World Bank funded support to parcelization of lands for individual titling or split programs. No new private land holding was acquired and covered. No new land reform areas were distributed. The illusion was made possible by chopping up all collective clauses. Marcos Jr. calls it land reform. We call it land grabbing through new names and tactics. As of 2025, 7 out of 10 Filipino peasants still do not own the land they till. The top 1% landowners hold 20% of all agricultural lands. In Negros Island, the situation is even more dire. Only 18% of farmers cultivate land they actually own. This is not land reform. It is the continuation of age-old feudal plunder. At the same time, massive infrastructure and energy projects are paving over agricultural lands, forests, and communities. Central Luzon, once the rice granary, is now a land use conversion hotspot. New Clark City, the Bulacan Airport, billions poured in to displace thousands, and Marcos Jr.'s friends and corporate donors like Aboitiz get special economic zones in land use conversion hotspots like Hacienda Lucita. The Marcos Jr. regime only disguised land grabbing behind green rhetoric. It's called clean energy, strategic investments, energy transition. But what do solar farms, wind parks, and mining do? These displace peasants and indigenous peoples. They destroy watersheds and grab ancestral lands. Some of these include the 3,500 hectare Terra Solar project, the Makilala Copper Gold Mine, and the Laguna Lake floating solar project. All of this to attract more foreign capital and to open the country to 99-year foreign land lease and speculative land use markets. Across domestic agriculture, crisis reigns. Sugar production is down, coconut farmers are neglected, swine and pork farmers were wrecked by the African swine fever and import dependence. Fisher folk are pushed aside by commercial fishing vessels and reclamations. In Manila Bay, every sector is wrecked, and the only ones who thrive are traders, importers, and foreign corporations. The state violence is also systemic. Human rights violations persist, especially in the countryside. Human rights group Karapatan has documented 119 cases of extrajudicial killings, and 72% are peasants. Thousands more red-tagged, harassed, bombed, or driven from their homes due to intense militarization. Behind Executive Order Number 70 and Memorandum Circular Number 83, behind so-called whole-of-nation governance is a state waging war on its own people. And all of this, while Marcos Jr. sells our national sovereignty, our farms, our waters, our people, sacrificed for U.S. government's Indo-Pacific strategy. This is a true face of bagong Pilipinas, lendlessness, hunger, terror, foreign plunder, and control. But despite all this darkness, one thing shines: the Filipino peasant struggle. From Luzon to Mindanao, peasants are rising. The Central Luzon Farmers Protest Camp at Dar, the Ambalas renewed campaign in Hacienda Lucita, the persisting bungkalan or land cultivation in the island of Negros, the anti-conversion alliances in southern Tagalog, regular Bagsakan Farmers Market from Bulacan, KMP's 40 years of arduous struggles and bright victories. Even in the recent midterm elections, our voice was heard. KMP Chairperson Danilo Ramos, the lone peasant senatoriable, garnered and won 4.1 million votes despite red tagging, despite lack of land, lack of funds, despite the challenges. From this day forward, we look ahead to face intensifying land grabs, new anti-peasant laws, bigger foreign loans, U.S.-led wars, but we also look forward to growing resistance, stronger unity, and deeper roots of our movement. We say, enough Marcos Jr. has no substance and no solutions to worsening crisis of a semi-feudal and semi-colonial Philippine society. The only way forward is to break from domestic feudalism and neoliberalism, to end foreign plunder, to enact genuine agrarian reform and national industrialization programs, and build a just, sovereign, and self-reliant society. History is on our side. The future belongs to those who till the land. Lupa para sa nagbubungkal, hindi para sa diktador, hindi para sa mga dayuhan, hindi para sa mga sendero at negosyo. Mabuhay ang paikibaka ng mga magsasaka. Mabuhay ang sambayan ng Pilipino. Long live the struggle of the Filipino peasants. Long live the Filipino people. Long live international solidarity.
Assalamualaikum, may peace be upon you all. I extend my greetings of peace to all participants and to my fellow human rights defenders, migrants and allies, friends and sponsors. I chirp, echo voice, and interfaith solidarity for the Philippines. I sincerely apologize for not being able to join you in Rome for the conference today. As I speak, the embassy is still holding my passport despite our persistent follow-ups. Nevertheless, I am truly glad to be with you virtually. We are living in a time marked by intensified U.S.-led wars of aggression, particularly in West Asia or the Middle East. U.S. President Donald Trump enabled Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Zionist Israel to commit genocidal crimes against the Palestinian people and initiated attacks against Iran. On June 23, the United States bombed 3 Iranian nuclear sites, facilities that had already been inspected by UN agencies and declared non-threatening. After declaring victory, the U.S. government showed no concern for civilian or environmental impact, especially since one of the bombed areas is a major uranium source. Earlier, on June 13, a Friday, the sacred day of Jumu'ah for Muslims, Israel launched airstrikes on Iran that killed more than 220 people. Yet the narrative is still spun in Israel's favor, claiming it was a preemptive act of self-defense, echoing the same argument used to justify the genocide in Gaza and across Palestine. The world must condemn U.S. bombing of Iran. If we don't, it sets yet another dangerous precedent, justifying invasions, regime change, settler occupation, bombing of cities, and the destruction of sovereign nations. We must expose these U.S. wars of aggression for what they are, tools to advance imperialist objectives, dominating sovereign nations, controlling energy and trade routes, and profiting from war through the military-industrial complex. The world clearly sees how the U.S. is provoking war. The Zionist government of Israel benefits from this warmongering, using modern weapons against countries like Palestine, Syria, and Lebanon, leading to genocide in Gaza, the displacements of thousands, and the destruction of entire communities. Over 52,000 Palestinians have already been killed in Gaza due to the genocidal campaign waged by the U.S.-Israel alliance against Hamas. This same horror now looms over the Iranian people, with more than 220 killed in airstrikes since June 13. These attacks have already had profound and far-reaching impacts on peoples of faith and interfaith communities around the world. It has become increasingly difficult to criticize Zionism or Israel's military aggression without being labeled anti-Semitic. As tensions escalate, interfaith communities face immense challenges. Their efforts to bridge divides are undermined by the growing narrative of religious conflict. The impact of U.S. militarism in the marginalized communities in the Philippines. In the Asia-Pacific, the U.S. is pressuring allied countries into war, promoting lasting socio-economic partnerships and defense and security cooperation under the Indo-Pacific strategy aimed at countering China. Under President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., the Philippines' subservience to U.S. policy has deepened. Bilateral agreements have expanded, including the addition of EDCA sites, intensified military exercises like Balikatan, with participation from countries like Japan and Australia, the deployment of high-end weapon systems such as the attack missiles, and visiting forces agreements. Marcos Jr. has also allowed the deployment of attack missiles, effectively turning the Philippines into a forward base with forward troops, making us a target in any potential conflict with China and other countries. But U.S. militarism and the Philippine military buildup in the West Philippine Sea cannot hide the worsening poverty experienced by the people, soaring prices of goods, low wages for workers, landlessness among farmers and indigenous communities, and the lack of basic services such as housing, healthcare, and education. A larger portion of the national budget is allocated to foreign debt payments and military defense modernization than to essential public services urgently needed by the people. On top of this, there are looming plans to sell remaining public service agencies to foreign and private companies and to allow 100% foreign ownership of land. Worsening human rights violation. Despite political differences, the Marcos and Duterte dynasties share a bloody legacy of human rights abuses, including state-sponsored bombings, fabricated charges, militarization, and mass displacement. According to Karapatan, the Marcos Jr. administration is responsible for more than 119 extrajudicial killings, 76 frustrated killings, 14 enforced disappearances, 3,582 forced evacuation, 63,380 victims of indiscriminate firing, and 46,921 victims of bombings. Laws are being weaponized against indigenous peoples and environmental defenders, particularly through the Anti-Terrorism Act of 2020 and anti-terrorist financing laws, which are used to harass those defending marginalized communities. These laws, alongside counterinsurgency program, have led to killings, abductions, and false charges against indigenous and moral leaders protecting ancestral lands and natural resources. For over a decade, the Philippines has been the deadliest country in Asia for environmental defenders. Under Marcos, red tagging has worsened and attacks on activists have escalated. Many now face abduction, harassment, or extrajudicial killing. In the Cordilleras, nearly all community leaders have been charged with terrorist financing, especially the members and officers of the group Cordillera People's Alliance. In Mindanao, Lumad schools and their supporters, including nuns, priests and pastors from the groups like the Rural Missionaries of the Philippines and United Church of Christ in the Philippines have been persecuted for providing education and disaster relief. To extract minerals from indigenous land, the government manipulates the free, prior, and informed consent process, often using intimidation to secure signatures from the indigenous people. The NCIP, the agency meant to protect indigenous rights, is widely accused of corruption and collusion with the military and corporation and is introducing revisions to the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act that would further water down the rights of the IPs in the Philippines over their land. As indigenous and Moro communities resist, military bombings and aerial strikes continue, targeting those opposing mining plantations, militarization, and the presence of U.S. troops and missiles. These offensives displace indigenous peoples and farmers across rural areas. Since Marcos took office in 2022, there have been at least 12 bombings of indigenous communities in Hinimamaylan, Negros Occidental, in Mangyan areas in Mindoro, in the Cordillera, the provinces of Abra, Cagayan Valley, Kalinga, Ilocos Sur, and among Lumad in Surigao del Sur. The most recent strike, again, targeted the Mangyan in Mindoro. Meanwhile, the people of Marawi, displaced by Duterte's 5-month bombing campaign under martial law in 2017, have yet to recover. Marcos has failed to compensate them adequately. Of over 350,000 evacuees, fewer than 1,000 have received recognition and aid and compensated. Today, 32,000 families still live in temporary shelters and now facing eviction as contracts expire. Human rights and land rights violations should have been addressed in peace negotiations between Philippine government and the National Democratic Front, particularly through mechanisms like the Comprehensive Agreement on Respect for Human Rights and International Humanitarian Law, CARIL, and the Comprehensive Agreement on Socio-Economic Reforms, CASER. However, peace talks have been undermined by counterinsurgency efforts of the Marcos Jr. regime. Even peace consultants are being assassinated or designated as terrorists under the Anti-Terrorism Act of 2020. Executive Order Number 70, which created the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict, or NTF-LCAC, remains in force. Now, with Marcos and the military declaring an quote-unquote insurgency-free Philippines, more blood will be spilled, bringing grave violations of international law, including the killing of civilians and militarization of communities. Similar issues are absent from the government's peace talks with the Moro fronts, like the Moro National Liberation Front and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. Both are now part of the Bangsamoro Transition Authority, which is leading the shift from armed struggle to governments in the BARM, or the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, currently composed of 4 provinces, 2 cities, and special barangays in North Cotabato. The MILF and the MNLF have also become political parties competing for power in the autonomous region and coming elections in October. This transformation is part of the decommissioning process under the peace deal. But despite disagreements, Moro areas remain among the country's poorest, with high illiteracy and continued vulnerability, especially under the new anti-terror and counterinsurgency policies that advance U.S. geopolitical interests in the Philippines. As peoples of faith, faith-based organizations, and peace-loving communities, we are morally and spiritually compelled to confront the realities of war, militarism, and imperialism. Let this conference be more than a reflection. Let it be a space where we forge collective analysis, declaration, and concrete action to expose and oppose wars of aggression and prevent further genocide in our time. Sukran, thank you, and wassalamu alaikum.
It's a shame that she could not be here. Anyway, last but not least, we will now hear from Bishop Gerardo Alminaza, Filipino bishop of the Roman Catholic Church, who has been serving as the bishop of the Diocese of San Carlos in Negros, Philippines, since 2013. and he was previously also an auxiliary bishop of Jaro and titular bishop of Maximiana in Bizacena, from 2008 until 2013. And currently, he's also the vice president of Caritas Philippines. Bishop, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Claire. I'd like to start right away from Galatians chapter 6, verse 9. For we will reap at harvest time if we do not give up. Good morning to all of you. What a deep joy it is to be here in this city of bridges and faith, together with you all. Some of you have crossed oceans and mountains to be here like myself. Others may have simply crossed a street, but each of you brings a sacred presence. Thank you very much for coming. We are gathered for a profound purpose, an interfaith encounter rooted in solidarity with the Filipino people's struggle for peace. This room is filled with people of faith, of conscience, of action. To be surrounded by peace builders and human rights defenders who have chosen to stand with my kababayan, my fellow Filipinos, is nothing short of awe-inspiring. Maraming salamat po, agyamanak unay, salamat gid nga madamo. Thank you from the depths of our people's hearts. We pray you truly know what your accompaniment has meant, especially for the red-tagged, the detained, the disappeared, and all who long for justice in our land. We call this gathering Pagtatanim, planting season. This conference is a sacred opportunity to cross-pollinate ideas, to plant seeds of justice, and to nurture hope even in a climate of violence, denial, and fear. We believe even in dry soil, seeds can still sprout. Even in poisoned rivers, life still steers. Even in a wounded land, hope can grow again. And so we dare to imagine hillsides becoming forest again, mangroves and coral reefs revived, clean air, clean water, clean governance. We dare to dream jubilee, that sacred call to restore balance, return land, forgive debts, and set captives free. Wars rage, the climate collapses, inequality widens, and always the poorest suffer first and worst. This is not accidental. It is the bitter fruit of greed, of imperialism, of impunity. We must name it. Violence has a source, wrote Father Neil O'Brien, a Columban missionary detained under martial law, one of the Negros 9. That source is injustice. If we sow injustice, he says, we reap violence. That is why we cannot speak of peace without first speaking of justice. I speak to you today not as a theorist, but as a witness. I grew up in Sipalay, now a city in Negros Occidental, once home to the copper mining empire of Maricalom. As a child, I felt the earth tremble from daily mining blasts. I saw tailings destroy our farmlands. I learned early what exploitation looks like. My story unfolded against a bigger backdrop, Negros, the sugar bowl of the Philippines, a land of stark inequality, very much repeated island in the previous sharers before me, described by the late Bishop Antonio Y. Fortich, who ordained me as a priest, as an island with a social volcano ready to erupt. Hacienda landlords lived in luxury, while sacadas, sugarcane workers, barely survived. But from that volcano of injustice, a church rose up. Bishop Antonio Fortich, the late Father Luis San Antoni that we gave tribute earlier, the Social Action Center, they all stood with the poor. They were red-tagged, harassed, exiled, but they planted seeds that still bear fruit today. Let me be clear. To remain neutral in the face of injustice is to side with the oppressor. May I repeat? To remain neutral in the face of injustice is to side with the oppressor. The gospel calls us to uproot the weeds of militarism, lies, and fear, not with hate, but with active, daring love. And so many in the church accompany the poor, sheltering those under threat, visiting political prisoners, searching for the disappeared, advocating for peace talks, not surrender. It is in this same spirit that I recall the episcopal motto of our prophetic shepherd, Bishop Antonio Y. Fortich of the Diocese of Bacolod, to which I originally belong, and our beloved Luis Salandoni also once served as the Social Action Director. His episcopal motto was Insta, taken from St. Paul's charge to Timothy, and I quote, "Preach the word, be instant, in season or out of season, reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long-suffering and doctrine," unquote. Bishop Fortich lived this call, proclaiming the truth whether it was welcomed or resisted, standing with the poor not just when it was convenient or safe, but especially when it was dangerous and costly. We too are called to that same gospel urgency, to speak not only when the world is listening, but even when the world would rather silence us. Our struggle isn't just local, it is geopolitical. The US and China play tug of war in our waters, our skies, our land. The Philippines remains a neo-colony, its sovereignty eroded. We decry all wars of aggression. We resist all foreign military aid that fuels violence. We say, this land, our land, is not a pawn. This land is home. Look to Mindanao, 30,000 families still displaced after the Marawi siege. Lumad schools shut down, children criminalized. Peace initiatives blocked by militarization. This is not just injustice. It is a spiritual wound. Let us remember, every Lumad, every Moro child is not a threat. They are our kapwa, our sacred neighbors. Let me now speak plainly about the weaponization of laws. 745 political prisoners, over 100 from Negros Island alone, my home place. Many falsely charged with possession of explosives and non-bailable offense. Some say they plant rice, but others plant lies, red tagging, fake testimonies. Even giving rise to a community can now be labeled terrorist financing, quote unquote. And still, we plant truth. Let me quote again from scripture, that one that I quoted from the beginning, from Galatians chapter 6, verse 9. Let us not grow weary in doing what is right, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. I did not set out to be a climate activist, but God's call through Laudato Si and the cry of the earth led me there. With the youth in my diocese, we stopped coal plants. We called out illegal reclamation. And in 2022, we committed the Philippine Church to divest from fossil fuels by 2025, this Jubilee year of hope. Pope Francis in Laudato Si number 48 says, "The deterioration of the environment and of society affects the most vulnerable." This is not just about the planet, it's about people. The poor always suffer first. Let me bring you now to Greta Thunberg, then just 15 years old, when she said, and I quote her, "Once we start to act, hope is everywhere." Indeed, hope is not a feeling. It is a discipline. It is a muscle we build, a seed we plant, a path we walk. Some concrete seeds to plant. Here are 5 concrete ways you can help us in the Philippines. 1. Organize theological reflections on just peace tied to real campaigns. 2. Advocate for an end to U.S. foreign military aid used for repression. 3. Accompany vulnerable communities, human rights defenders, and church workers. 4. Push for the release of political prisoners and support displaced peoples and the families of the disappeared. And 5. Join ecumenical pushback campaigns to defend the oppressed and stop the red tagging. Our final call: let us plant hope together. Whether you are a sister in Rome, a pastor in Canada, a rabbi in Brooklyn, or an imam in Mindanao, you can help plant, nurture, and harvest justice. As for me, I remain that boy from Sipalay who now plants not crops, but conviction, not just resistance, but resurrection. I invite you now to stand with me and pray. Lord, make us instruments of your peace. Let there be food for all. Let there be an end to wars. Let there be equality. Let there be justice. Let there be love. Let there be authentic charity. Lord, form us to be artisans of your peace, to value solidarity built on human fraternity, to foster the common good shaped by concern for all, to pursue peace fostered by justice, to protect nature rooted in the culture of care, to uplift the poor, nurtured by authentic charity. Lord, let peace be our prayer, that there will be an end to killings and violence, that there will be harmony among religions, that there will be unity among societies, that there will be peace among us. Amen. Maraming salamat.
Thank you very much, these dear speakers, for laying down the foundation of this conference. We now understand the plight of the Filipino peasants and their struggle for land and for rights, and how much we need to be in solidarity with them. It has been my pleasure to moderate this panel with you. Maraming salamat.